They waited. For weeks, 4 months, watching the routes, tracking schedules, counting the hours until the lifeblood of an army would arrive. And when the fuel train finally rolled into the trap, Ukraine didn't just hit it. They finished it, sabotaged to stop it, and US supplied HIMARS rockets to make sure nothing could be salvaged. The result was a single operation that burned through a key Russian supply line, and for a moment, the map itself shifted. This is the story behind that strike: who planned it, why it mattered, how it unfolded, and what the damage looks like now. If you want deep, real reporting that explains the military logic and the human cost, stick around. You'll see how precision weapons, patient intelligence work, and timing turned a routine fuel delivery into a strategic catastrophe. How do you stop a whole front line from being refueled? You start by making sure the fuel never reaches the engines. 4 months, Ukrainian intelligence had watched a pattern. Fuel and refined products were being moved from Crimea and other controlled ports to Russian-occupied areas by rail. Long trains of tanker cars stretching dozens of meters, carrying the gasoline and diesel that kept vehicles, generators, and frontline logistics alive. Hit enough of those deliveries, and you don't just burn fuel, you blunt an army's mobility and slow its operations. Ukraine's services picked a target: a long train of tank cars traveling a vulnerable rail section in the occupied Zaporizhzhia region. On December 14, 2024, the plan moved from paper to action. Saboteurs, part of a coordinated effort involving the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, military intelligence, special operations, and unmanned systems units, damaged the rail line to halt the train. With the train stopped and unable to be moved quickly, Ukrainian forces then used HIMARS rockets to strike the locomotive and key tank cars, setting the remaining cars ablaze and ensuring the cargo could not be recovered or rerouted. What might have been a salvageable shipment became a total loss. Why go to such lengths? Because in modern warfare, fuel is a weapon. A single destroyed train can deprive a whole operational group of the fuel needed for tanks, artillery tractors, generators, and supply trucks. The December operation reportedly destroyed 40 tank cars, essentially removing a significant quantity of fuel from Russia's logistics chain and damaging the rail link used to move supplies from Crimea into occupied territory. Kyiv's goal was tactical and strategic: immediate disruption on the battlefield, plus longer-term headaches for enemy logistics planners. Timing was everything. If you strike a moving train or a ship at sea, you risk losing the opportunity to capture damage on camera, to ensure total loss, or to avoid civilian harm. Sabotage to stop the convoy in a controlled location, then precision fire to deny recovery, is surgical. Reports from Kyiv explained this was a multi-stage operation. The rail was disabled first, the train halted, and then HIMARS rockets were called in to destroy what remained. That layering reduced the chance Russian crews could patch the line or drag the cars away before they burned. It was not an impromptu shelling, it was patient engineering. Let's break down the mechanics, because the how matters as much as the what. Stage 1: Intelligence and Reconnaissance. Signals, open-source movement data, spotter reports, and on-the-ground sabotage planning gave Ukrainian planners the window they needed. They identified the exact segment of track where, when the train slowed or stopped, it would be exposed and hard to defend. Stage 2: Interdiction. Forces on the ground sabotaged the track at a time calculated to force the train to halt where it could be safely targeted. This was not random vandalism. It was a targeted disruption designed to pin down a specific shipment. Stage 3: Strike. The US supplied HIMARS rocket systems, prized for their range, accuracy, and rapid reload, were used to hit the locomotive and select tank cars. The strikes were placed to ensure ignition, block salvage, and, crucially, deny the enemy any chance to move the cargo. HIMARS doesn't scatter ordnance like area artillery, it dishes out surgical, GPS-guided punishment. The result: a halted train, burning tank cars, and a rail link out of service. What did this actually cost the enemy? Different sources estimated the monetary and operational impacts in different ways, but the military effect was clear. At least 40 tank cars were removed from the logistics chain, the line linking Crimea to Zaporizhzhia was damaged, and immediate fuel supplies for local Russian units were cut off. For an army that stretches supply lines across hundreds of kilometers, that disruption forces decisions: slow offensives, reduce patrols, or ration fuel, all of which favor the defender. It's important to be precise about the facts here. Western media and Ukrainian statements described the operation as involving sabotage followed by HIMARS strikes that destroyed the locomotive and dozens of tank cars, and multiple outlets covered the incident with satellite imagery, official statements, and field reporting. Reuters, RFE/RL, the Kyiv Independent, and Ukrainian government outlets provided the most detailed, corroborated accounts. Wherever I report numbers or quotes, I've cross-checked them against those sources. Beyond the headlines, there are tactical takeaways that military planners on both sides are watching closely. First, logistics vulnerability is a strategic weakness. Armies can fortify front lines, but they cannot simultaneously secure every kilometer of rail and every coastal pier. Ukraine's approach, turning logistics into a battlefield, forces the opponent to commit resources away from the front line to guard supply routes. That dilutes offensive power. Second, asymmetric integrations work. Combine human intelligence, sabotage teams, drones, and artillery in a coordinated operation and you can defeat raw numerical superiority. HIMARS is a tool, but it's the ecosystem, intelligence, timing, and follow-through that makes it decisive. Third, the information effect is real. A single dramatic image, a train in flames, tank cars burning, has operational impact beyond the material loss. It forces commanders to reroute, to slow, to take more cautious supply measures. That creates windows elsewhere on the map where Ukrainian units can exploit reduced pressure. There are also civilian and environmental receipts to the ledger. Fuel fires burn hot and toxic. Local communities face smoke, contamination, and damaged infrastructure. Rail damage affects civilian traffic long after the military urgency passes. These costs don't nullify the military rationale, but they matter and they shape both domestic and international reactions to such operations. So what happened next? How did Russia react, and what did it mean for the front? Russian sources complained of sabotage and accused Kyiv of criminal strikes on logistics. Moscow moved to repair and secure rail lines, to reroute shipments, and to increase escorting of critical convoys. But repairs take time, and rerouting requires capacity and exposes other choke points. In the short term, Russian units dependent on that train's fuel had to stretch reserves and slow certain operations, exactly the operational friction Kyiv wanted to generate. Internationally, analysts flagged the strike as an example of Ukraine's growing proficiency in targeting logistics deep in occupied territory. Now let me ask you, which matters more in war, the big tank battle everyone watches, or the quiet disruption that robs the tank of fuel? Comment below with your take. Is logistics the true backbone of modern warfare, or still the unsung hero? Drop your answer, I read every comment. Before we wrap, 3 key lessons to remember from this operation. Precision strikes backed by patient intel can produce outsized strategic results. One destroyed train equals days or weeks of operational delay for the opponent. Modern weapons like HIMARS are force multipliers, but only when integrated into multi-domain operations that include human intelligence, sabotage, and unmanned systems. Attacks on logistics are a double-edged sword, militarily effective, but potentially costly for civilians and the environment, and they reshape the moral and political calculus of a conflict. If you want context, this was not a one-off. Throughout 2023 to 2025, Ukraine repeatedly targeted fuel depots, rail lines, and ports used to move supplies to occupied areas, from strikes on depot storage to drone attacks on tankers aiming to create systemic pressure on Russian logistics. Each operation is different in scale and method, but together they form a strategy: make the enemy's supply web fragile, then strike the strands. You've just heard the tactical anatomy of one such strike. But a single operation is part of a larger campaign, one that blends conventional firepower with intelligence, sabotage, and the political objective of limping an opponent's ability to wage war. If this kind of breakdown helps you see the war differently, here's what you can do next. Subscribe for more episodes where we unpack the decisions behind the headlines, the operations that change the map, not just the ones that make the evening news. And hit like if you want a future deep dive on how rail interdiction compares to maritime interdiction. I'll take both and show the differences. Which would you rather see next? The story of a port strike that halted exports? Or a rail campaign that choked an entire region? Tell me in the comments. One final thought: war is often understood through big, dramatic battles. But strategy is written in small, stubborn acts of disruption, in the patient timing of sabotage, in the targeting choices of commanders, and in the cold arithmetic of fuel, food, and freight. That's where campaigns are won or stalled. That's where HIMARS, human intelligence, and a well-timed strike can reshape plans for weeks to come. If you found this useful, subscribe and ring the bell. We'll keep bringing you clear, sourced, and tactical explanations of the events that actually move the war. Drop a comment answering the question above, and I'll pin the most thoughtful reply. Thanks for watching. Sources used in this report include reporting and official statements from Reuters, the Kyiv Independent, RFE/RL, Ukrinform, and aggregated field reporting that covered the December 14 to 15, 2024 operation and related logistics strikes.